Test the claim.
Sure? Oh, you got one? You got one? Well, I want you to get her.
I'm getting some support.
Go ahead.
I need some support, yeah.
Yeah, look, I actually feel what you were saying about seeing things through the human
Oh,
lens.
it's tag team wrestling.
Oh, yes.
This
Okay,
is what
right.
people are missing all the time.
Sorry,
Everything
sorry,
people see, they see it through the flawed lenses of being what it means to be a human, through the flawed and limited lenses. There is nothing that humans can, see in its completion, but we can make very accurate presumptions of what things are, and that's how we live.
Yeah.
That's
It's
how
quality.
David Hume divides truth in three different kinds. We spoke with Tony about this the other day.
Yeah, we
about
were.
the relations of ideas, which are unquestionable to an extent at least. Ideas of logic that are not very applicable to the real world.
Sorry, 1 minute.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know that I'm necessarily in on this. I don't know how
No,
much
I think you should ask him about why. I mean, you believe that we should live in a more matriarchal society than patriarchal. That's what you said earlier.
As I said earlier,
I think, sorry,
right?
you're right about David Hume.
If you are
let's go in a
to
minute.
analyze the world, the universe,
Yeah.
or nature,
So you have to start again. I lost track.
nature itself being, a phenomena that things emerge out of.
Right.
And then you look at the male principle as being the fecundatum factor.
Being the
right?
what?
The
Factor?
fecundatum factor.
What does that mean?
That which impregnates,
Oh, okay,
right?
fine.
While the female being that which brings forth. So looking at it that way, you realize that if we're in a state of peace, constant peace, then by nature, right, the matriarchy will take reign. But if we're in a state of war, then the patriarchy takes reign. So therefore, you can come to the conclusion that patriarchy itself is war.
I
You
don't
could.
think the logic follows.
Where the hell is... No offense. I see very little logic in what you just said.
Okay, put it this way. Let's say we're living in 2050 something, and we have a sophisticated state of AI. The AI has reached a state where the role of male as a traditional protector and provider does not exist anymore. So the machine has taken over that role. Do you think that naturally the male will begin to assume a more feminine characteristic?
Not sure. But look, what I'm more interested in is what you began off with. You describe nature in a feminine way, which is subjective, right? In some languages, when they're speaking about the moon, they refer to the moon in a female way. In some languages, it's male. But I'm not understanding, and that's what Tony pointed to, your logic to go from there to we should live in a more matriarchal society. I don't see the logic there.
No, not that we should. What I'm simply saying is that if there is sustained peace, right, naturally matriarchy takes reign.
Why?
Okay,
I don't think so.
look at today, because the state or the government has superseded the role of the male as the absolute provider. We're moving slowly toward a matriarchy, and that's the reason why a lot of males are angry.
Okay.
That's why we have guys
So
like
there's
Andrew
two,
Tate.
there's two things here. There's description. I'm not interested in description. I'm interested in prescription. You said we should live in a more matriarchal society. Why?
Okay, so if we're in a matriarchal society, for one, we'll have less wars.
That's a huge assumption.
Look at the last 100
sorry.
years.
Okay,
the last
sorry.
100 years, who started all the wars?
How certain are you of that statement?
Hitler wasn't a woman.
How certain are you of that statement? You might be right. I'm asking you on a scale of 1 to 100. How sure are you of that? Because it seems to be based on a huge number of assumptions. I haven't heard yet. Maybe you're correct. But how certain are you of that? 100% sure?
0 to
50?
10, where would you be?
Yeah, I'm 100% sure.
You're 100%
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
that if this was a matriarchy, there'd be less wars.
There will be less wars.
So men fight.
And what
more than women.
typifies a
So women
matriarchy?
don't fight.
Women fight, but you see, okay, you have to look at what capitalism is. Capitalism is a tool of the patriarchy because it's competition.
No,
But
as a
competition
general-
is inherent in nature.
Yeah,
Don't
exactly.
fight.
Huh?
Competition is inherent in nature.
I wouldn't
We see it
say
in
that.
every
I
other
wouldn't say
species.
that.
You wouldn't.
Because we can see
What animal, what species do you not see in competition
we
with
can
itself?
we
within
can
its own-
see an altruistic nature as well.
Hold on,
Okay,
I didn't say
right?
that threaded into there wasn't some altruism.
Yeah.
But you show me any species. Let's put humans aside for a minute. In the rest of nature, Where is it? You
No, but
don't see inherent competition.
You can go down to the level of animals. That's why you're a human being.
Well, we're
and
talking
that's
about
why I
nature.
said,
and
wait,
if I-
hold
if I
on,
wanna
hold on,
talk
hold
about
on.
nature, I can look
That's
at
why I said
animals.
when there's a sustained state of peace,
Uh-huh.
peace, right, is a byproduct of development, is a byproduct of intellectual development, is a byproduct of advancement of a species. So if we're advanced to a certain level and there's sustained peace, then there wouldn't be necessarily.
No, but Tony's asking something different.
Yeah.
What he's basically referring to is trying to understand your logic here. So your first statement that you made is the world's going to be more peaceful if women are in charge. And your other statement was that competition is why we have a patriarchy rather than matriarchy. And you believe in nature, which is why you have the...
And then he said, if we look at the rest of nature, we would see a lot of competition.
Yeah,
but then I said those are animals, right?
but look,
And the
let
whole
me
point of
just
being
summarize-
human
let me
is
just
to
summarize
use your
your
brain,
logic
right?
first.
To make things easier.
you went-
So there wouldn't be any need for competition.
Let him
I'm
talk.
summarizing what you're saying.
Right.
Then you spoke about nature and you linked nature to capitalism, right? And you tried to say that patriarchy is due to capitalism. When actually, say if you take someone like Darwin, he took his description of nature from Thomas Malthus's idea of capitalism, of there being short supply and a lot of demand. So in fact, it's inverted. It's the other way around to what you're claiming. Nature is competitive, and from that, according to you, we get patriarchy rather than matriarchy. So if we're going to follow nature, we should be more patriarchal according to your logic.
No, that's not it. So
Why is it?
nature is competitive to the extent that you do not become an evolved creature. The more developed you become as a species, the more you remedy against some of the main struggles that species go through. So there's no longer any need for you to fight for food,
hang on.
right?
Wait, that's
Because
the
you
end
can
goal
produce.
that you aspire to, but you get there starting with a raw material which is inherently competitive. In every species, we see that, the Darwinian struggle, whether you believe in it literally or not.
I understand where
the
you guys are coming
metaphorical
from.
Darwinian struggle is being acted out. Ultimately, that's mediated by force, and as a generalization, men are better than women at enacting force, because we tend to be stronger. So we tend to be the shock troops in that conflict. That seems to be the natural order of things. I'm not saying I like that, and you want to move towards less conflict.
That's before we get advanced enough.
Okay, so if you want to argue that bringing in more matriarchal influence will counterbalance an excess of the masculine and conflict, then I can see you may have a point.
No, I'm saying
but if
it
you're
will
arguing
happen.
that nature is inherently matriarchal,
It
I
will-
think you've got no axiom.
It will happen naturally. The more developed we become, the matriarchy will take over. Because the more developed we become, the less necessity is there.
Imagine a world with no competition.
The Titans have no conversation.
When the machine takes over, when the AI takes over, we have less competition. We already have less competition than we did.
Yeah, but when the machine takes over, can that be called a matriarchy? That would be something like
matriarchal society.
I know you can see that.
So put it this way:
That nature,
the role of the
if we're to
state
follow our
has
natural
recently
instincts and go down that
superseded
route,
the
we
role
would
of the
be more
traditional
matriarchal
male
than
as a
patriarchal.
provider, as a sole provider.
Yes, that's correct.
So the more we live in a situation whereby the machine has taken over the role of the traditional role of the male, the more the patriarchy disappears, because the patriarchy is a byproduct of war. It's
But the
sustained
machine
by
doesn't
war.
take power from patriarchy alone. It takes power from patriarchy and matriarchy. If the machines are becoming more and more important in the lives of humans, that doesn't necessarily make humanity into a matriarchy because
he
it
was on his
takes
team.
power from both. No, I was on his team on something else. On a different
No,
point, on the topic of,
okay, all right.
understanding.
Wait. I go back to
Okay, so
Hinduism.
firstly, you know your hat.
Yeah.
You believe in the female goddess that we should follow.
I go back to. All right, go
I
ahead.
almost feel like everything you're saying is to please feminists.
Okay.
That's what it feels like.
All right, I go back
Is
to
it a
Hinduism.
coincidence?
Let's go back to the goddess Kali, right? She used to be known as Durga.
In Hinduism.
Yep. And then she became Kali because she was told to go and fight a demon. And the other gods didn't tell her that the demon can only be destroyed by the naked body of a female. So she didn't know that. And she went into war with this dangerous demon and almost died. And when she realized that That's why she turned into Kali.
but-
So it's kind of like
With
How is that-
respect,
how is that
I'm not
evidence?
sure that a mythological story is a good basis
I'm-
for a
I'm-
functioning
I'm-
political.
wait. I'm
Okay,
taking
sorry,
you there. I'm taking you there.
I mean, I could
So-
quote you Harry Potter. and we
Wait.
could,
What I'm trying to say
Let's
with
follow
that
you.
is to answer his question, because he said if the machine has taken over the role of the male as a traditional provider, surely the machine robs from the matriarchy as well. That's his question.
Oh, nice point.
So what I'm trying to say is that the naked body of a female to a male, right? It still remains something powerful.
Yeah.
But I don't see how any of
That's
this is
true, but a
connected
machine
to
can
your
replicate that. I don't
overall philosophy.
I don't
How
think
does
it's
the
very
machine
cogent,
replicate that?
I'm afraid.
Must I go into details?
It's got an idiosyncratic
so
surface.
It's not something I support, by the way, but it's just something that is happening to an extent.
I'll try and fight your
Okay,
corner. I think if you're saying that we may be heading towards more of a matriarchy
Yeah.
as a counterbalance,
Yeah.
and that may be a better place to be, you may be right.
Yeah.
The balancing of the female, but you're arguing the female as a primary cause and an axiomic force
Of nature.
and that just doesn't tally with any of the evidence.
Doesn't tally with the evidence?
No, but the evidence is I'm saying that all species are violently competitive.
Yeah, but that's because they're animals, though.
I know, but you said nature. My statement was nature is inherently competitive, and if I'm looking for examples of nature, I look to animals.
No, but
They're
those
the
are
most
animals.
implicit-
So
Okay, so let me give you a counter example. You know,
Right.
bonobos, right? There you find the females being more aggressive than the males.
again, you're giving me examples from animals. The whole aim of being human is to have more intelligence so that you can solve
Yes, but
problems.
your argument-
But the more intelligent we become, and the more we can solve these problems, the less competition will be there.
You keep flipping between two positions. You started off by saying that human beings, by our nature, have to interpret things through a lens. So your appeal is to an argument from nature.
Uh-huh.
Yes, that's your primary.
Yeah, but
primary
nature.
point.
Yeah, but
And
nature.
then-
But
Human
nature
is
doesn't
different
mean the
from
animal kingdom.
nature.
Well, oh,
He's
sorry.
making a
You,
distinction between human nature and animal nature.
you don't see human nature as being a manifestation of
Human
nature in
nature
general.
is a manifestation of nature.
Yes.
But there's a difference between human nature and animal nature, and there's a difference between.
Well, there are some strong commonalities as well.
Yeah,
hugely strong commonalities. Yeah, we reproduce the same
the
way.
less advanced we are, the more similar to the animals we become. The more advanced we are, the less similar to animals we become.
Yeah.
So say the
So
last part again.
if we're so advanced that we can create a system
Yeah.
that provides all of our basic necessities without us competing with each other, the more we become less masculine, for lack of a better word, right?
Why would us being less masculine be a good thing?
Why is it a good thing?
Why is it a good thing?
It's not whether it's good or bad. It's something that's gonna happen.
Okay, so now you're jumping between prescription and description.
Yeah.
Previously, you were saying this is the way it should be, and when you were talking to that,
No, the
I
way it
believe
should be
feminist
is my
earlier,
the way it should be is my
you were saying
personal
everything she
opinion.
wanted to hear. It's
The
like
way
music
it
to your
should be
ears.
is my personal opinion. But what I'm
Right.
saying is that eventually, as we get more advanced, it is going to happen.
Okay. We don't care. What I think both care about is identifying what the ideal is in any given conversation. So you seem to have an ideal. Yeah. Whether it's going to happen or not to me is totally secondary. It's not the point. I want you to tell me on the merits of your ideal and how it works, how it's logical and intuitive, and how many boxes it can tick.
How it works.
At the moment, with respect, I don't. Your heart may well be in the right place, and the culture may well lead a bit more feminization. Although I think the Me Too movement's gone too far. There's counterbalancing to be done.
So let me give you a concrete example. So with something like bonobos or other chimpanzees or whatever, and I said earlier that the females are more aggressive, but I could be wrong on that. But say one is more aggressive than the other, how do you derive from a fact of nature to the way that we should be? Do you think that's possible?
To the way that we should be
Yeah.
In-
The ideal.
in looking at bonobos.
Anything. I could be wrong about bonobos, but say chimpanzees or whatever. How do you go from this is what's happening in nature, so this is the way it should be? How do you make that jump from fact to is?
It's basically looking at intelligence. That's just where I'm coming from. The more intelligent we become as a species, the more our problems get solved.
Okay, let me explain to
Right.
you why I disagree with that. some of the best innovations humans came up with was during the time of war.
Yeah, but
So,
they still
we were
needed
using our
intelligence.
We were using our intelligence for nefarious ends. So the internet, V2 rockets, even currently Ukraine, Russia, technology, there's an arms race going on. So some of the greatest jumps in human technological advancement is due to our hatred of each other, not during times of
Yeah,
peace.
historically, this is almost incontrovertible.
No, but
Technology takes a giant leap during wars
hold
and
up.
conflicts.
You're
The atomic
talking
bomb,
about
look at the nuclear
necessity.
bomb.
You're talking about necessity being the mother of invention.
Yes.
Right? That's where you're coming
And the
from.
necessity here is war.
But what I'm trying to say is that, regardless of that, the more intelligent you become, the less problems you have.
Okay, let me
Isn't
kick
that right?
Let me kick back on that. Wait,
Go
just
on,
because there's a correlation between intelligence and becoming civilized doesn't mean that intelligence is the cause or the sole cause of that happening. Yeah, intelligence is a double-edged sword. It can facilitate, it can leverage civilization when it's used constructively, but intelligence is a tool. It can also be used incredibly destructively. So don't think that some of the worst people in the world are very intelligent. Some of the best people in the world aren't hugely bright. These are not moral virtues. And if you want a peaceful world, it's not going to be based on hard, brutal intelligence. It's going to be based on more human and empathic and ethical qualities. Yeah? Now, if you may argue that women are more implicitly and intuitively ethical, and there may be something in that, and maybe we need some more of it, but to me, you're not stringing together a cogent position at all. I'm sorry, you're really not.
So do you believe women, if they were in power, the world would be more peaceful than if male are in power?
Yeah, of course,
Okay.
certainly.
So let me explain to you why I think that's wrong. Human decision making is not something which we can solely put down to the distinction between genders. Most human decisions in terms of state to state interaction is based upon the self-interest of states. So for example, in international relations, and you spoke about states earlier, according to let me put it in a very simple way. If Adolf Hitler was in charge of World War II, was in charge of Nazi during the 1930s, or if it was the woman from New Zealand, what's her name?
Don't know.
Whatever her name is, right?
That's because regardless,
Yeah.
it was still a
One second.
patriarchy.
It's got nothing to do with patriarchy.
It's a patriarchy.
World War II would have taken place
Because
because
it's
of
a
the
patriarchy.
interests of Germany and the
No,
interests of
it's,
the
it's,
Allies.
it's because we were living in a patriarchy
No,
at
it's
the time.
not. No, it's not.
That is
I think we should give a few different
You're
definitions.
I think
just
that's
repeating
fine.
the assertion
We might
doesn't
have
add any credence to it. What do you have to back that up with? You're saying it was patriarchy, but you're just saying it as a flat assertion.
It was patriarchy because, all right, so put it this way.
And how are
and
you,
the-
as
Can you
Pavlo
define
said,
it?
how are
Can
you
you
defining
define
patriarchy?
So patriarchy is a system, right, whereby males are in charge of, let's start with the household and then the government. And when males are in charge, they compete with other males.
So if men
in-
and women get a vote in a
Just ask you a
democracy,
quick
is that
question, sorry to
patriarchal?
interrupt, but is patriarchy a system where males are usually in charge, or is it a system where only males can be in charge, only males are allowed to be in charge? Which one of those is your version of patriarchy?
It's both. So they put obstacles in place for females to get there. That's what they've done.
Okay,
I think that's too vague of a definition of patriarchy.
Yeah.
But earlier, let's break down patriarchy into, say, subunits. So one of the aspects of patriarchy you spoke about earlier was toxic masculinity, right? And the definition you gave there, I didn't agree with. So can you explain the definition again? Because I
Of
think,
toxic masculinity.
yeah.
So toxic masculinity is the same as hypermasculinity, and you see it in prison populations. They feel because they are not, exuding the traditional gender roles, then they have to show extra sexuality, extra, violence, mistreatment of females, all the things that are quote unquote masculine.
Sorry, they have to do that
an
because
extra
of
that.
what? You're saying their motive for behaving that way is what?
Their motive for behaving that way is because they feel they've been relegated to.
Okay, I think you're putting cause before effect. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan. I don't agree with everything he says, but I'm a
Right.
fan. He will say that in terms of aggression, the average male if you take any two people, the average male will be more aggressive than the woman about 60% of the time, which isn't a huge difference. So if you look at the bell curve of the average people, men and women are very, very similar. But what happens is, out at the very extremes of those curves, that's when that difference becomes highly significant, which is why in prison, 95% of your prison population are male. It's a reflection of that curve. That's the cause. The implicit bias, which is in the average not very extreme, is expressed very dramatically at the extremes of the curve, and that's why that's happening in prison. So they're not being brainwashed into some kind of ideology. They're just reflecting the nature which is implicit to the demograph.
So you wouldn't support the argument that due to the fact that the state has taken over a lot of the traditional male roles, this has given rise to the phenomenon known as incels, as an example.
I'm not even sure that's the case, and I think you've just made a massive jump in another direction. We just jumped to a totally different subject. Stick with the prison thing. You're saying, I'm a guy, I end up in prison, and the reason I end up being hyper-aggressive and over-sexualized is because I'm being conditioned by my society. Yeah? Peterson's curve would say
no. I didn't say because you're being conditioned.
Go on, okay.
I'm saying because certain things in the society are no longer serving you. So that's what brought that out.
Oh, okay, sorry. Then,
No,
actually,
no,
in
it's not
fairness, I think I
conditioned.
slightly misunderstood. Okay, so you're saying my nature is no longer appreciated and considered conducive to the society is repressing my true nature, and hence I become this way. Yeah.
Yeah.
That will become an argument for becoming more patriarchal to accommodate that nature, so it didn't become bottled up and have to become so violent. Sure.
So what is becoming more patriarchal?
I'm not sure anything is. You're the guy. I'm not in the. My skin's not in this game much. Okay.
No, but what wouldn't you
Let me
say
ask you in a
being
different way.
patriarchal, has something to do with hypermasculinity?
I'm not sure these are even very useful terms.
Let me give you an example. In the STEM sciences, right? Science, technology, you get it, engineering and mathematics. Majority of students are male. Does that mean it's patriarchal?
What do you mean by that?
Majority of students that study the hard sciences, technology, mathematics, engineering.
So
are
there
males.
are certain things that, based upon your gender, you are more predisposed to doing. You are more qualified to do it as well, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's patriarchal, right?
No, that doesn't mean. No, that doesn't mean. No.
But you are making an argument that because men are in charge, it's patriarchy. When it could simply be that men are inherently more likely to do mathematics, they're inherently more likely to have leadership than women.
No, that's not true. That's not true.
But
Men are
evidence
not.
would seem to support that.
Men are not in charge of society because of the STEM. No.
No. I'll give you an example. Men have more testosterone than women. That's a scientific fact. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, slightly
Okay.
more. Yeah.
Actually, significantly more. In some studies, it's shown 10 times as much, right? I don't know the exact numbers, but it's significantly more. So since they have more testosterone makes you more aggressive, more competitive. It even helps with your cognitive functioning. So when you have males with more testosterone, naturally, due to nature, they are more likely to be in leadership roles. Because to be a leader, no one just turns down and says, okay, you can be a leader, here you go. You have to fight for it. So that's why men are more likely.
You have to fight for it. That's the key word. So let me give you an example, or rather, let me say this. As a species, do human beings have more testosterone than chimpanzees?
I don't know.
Do human beings have more
Probably.
testosterone
Probably
than
less.
Neanderthals as a species?
Probably less.
Neanderthals had more testosterone than us. So therefore, you can see that there's a direct relationship between development and a reduction in testosterone.
No, that's not
No,
true.
that's
is the opposite.
You're doing
How is
correlation.
that the opposite?
You're doing correlation proves causality, and it
No,
totally doesn't. Just because there's a correlation between if Neanderthals had more and they became extinct, it doesn't mean that's the cause. It
That-
absolutely doesn't. And if you're assuming that's the case,
there are studies that have pointed or suggested that the more developed a species become, the obviously the less testosterone
That's not possible.
they
That's
have.
not possible because you're basically, like you said, correlation causation issue that you're obviously falling into. But there's another problem, which is that we know that intelligence actually is linked to your testosterone. So your cognitive function.
Where do you get that from?
Okay, so your cognitive abilities are linked to your testosterone levels. There are studies on this, which is why CEOs, military generals, and a lot of these types of people who have to do a lot of calculations in the decision making, they do exercise in the morning. This is well known and
No, but that
established.
isn't that because we're living in a war-based society?
No,
But
no,
if
no.
we're living in a peaceful matriarchy, you
Okay, firstly, why would
these
there be a
wouldn't
peaceful
be
matriarchy?
it wouldn't be the qualities
And
of a leader.
And secondly, when it comes down
Because
to
these seems like
No,
just
no, no, no.
they-
You're just
it seems
seems totally correct. If you
it
assume
seems
that
like the
part of
qualities
what's
of
necessary
a
with the
military
leadership-
general.
Part of what's necessary with the leadership is that you can be the shock troop and deal with conflict. Yeah. Okay. And dealing with conflict, testosterone is an asset in that situation. As a generalization, men have got more of that.
That's the key
Try it-
word.
try
The
it
key
from-
word is conflict.
Yeah.
That's because we're living in a
But
place of
conflict
conflict.
is inevitable
But
in
if
nature.
there is no conflict,
If
would
there's
there
no nature,
be
we're not living on
would there
planet
be a
Earth.
reason for a leader to have those qualities?
No,
if there's
but,
no
but
conflict,
if we were living on a flat Earth, would there any reason to have, satellites orbiting? I mean, we're not. We're
But the
living.
more-
We're hardwired in nature. Most of your arguments predicate on the assumption we're hardwired in nature.
The more
and
advanced
inherent
we
in nature
become.
is conflict. Let me pitch you a different idea with testosterone. Presumably, whatever the condition of the society in nature at any given time, there's an optimum amount of testosterone to have.
Yeah.
Because it can be both a constructive thing for enabling you to deal with conflict and a negative if you overdose on it and then you're just banging your and other people's head against prison bars, which we don't want. But so there's an optimum amount to have, hopefully we could all agree, of testosterone, yeah? So it's not per se a
for
negative.
Men, it's much higher than women. Women do not produce as much testosterone as men.
As a generalization,
And
there will-
therefore, they don't like being in conflict situations, but life is conflict. Life
no,
is
like
struggle.
no.
Nature's very
No,
interesting.
again,
Okay, then
the
you're
more
just in
developed
denial
you
of life.
become as a species, the more conflict you have. Are you trying to tell me we have the same level of conflict as lions
No, we're
in the
telling
wild?
you. We're telling
Are you
you.
trying to tell
Okay,
me we
look,
have
we're
the same
telling you
level of
it's
conflict
it's
as
implicit.
lower
We're telling
animals?
you that actually, when technology has gone up, we've seen conflict increase because the underlying human nature hasn't changed.
No.
So before we had spears, now we have missiles.
You
We
trying to
kill
tell
more.
me you have the same level of conflict as chimpanzees?
No, I think human beings are more violent.
More violent than,
More violent.
than chimpanzees?
Okay, there's
We're
That's not
certainly
true.
more destructive. We've developed
We can
tools
destroy the
which are
planet.
far more destructive.
That's not true. No.
No, that is true.
Okay.
That is
If
completely
we
true.
look at the, if
Yeah,
look
you
at the
develop tools
casualties of
because
this-
they can develop tools.
Okay, so
But-
what we've done, with our testosterone-based logic and cognitive abilities, we have radically leveraged our ability to do damage beyond what chimpanzees can do. Actually, that doesn't mean we're more inherently aggressive. It just means when we do get aggressive, we do more damage.
Chimpanzees do with nukes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
You
a
should
good
be
question.
in here. That's so. Somebody here should have clocked that. Thank
That's
you.
a good
What do you
question,
think?
yeah.
Yes,
That's
a
a
very.
good question.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
What do you think chimpanzees would do with nukes? I think
So-
they'd be pressing the button so fast.
Exactly, they would, right?
Thank you. So you're
They would.
proving our point.
So I'm proving that the more sophisticated you are as a species, the less violent you are.
Yes, but it's not because you don't have the potential to be violent. It's that you learn to channel it and not suppress it, but synthesize it. Arbitrate it in a more constructive fashion. Yeah, it's a combination of
this,
elements.
This goes not an inch towards your conclusion that we should be in a matriarchy rather than a patriarchy.
Yeah.
Why
And
not?
Look, okay, let me just make a direct statement. Call a spade if you like. What you were saying earlier to the woman who is clearly a feminist is everything she wants to hear. So I feel most of what you're saying is just simply there to agree with a narrative that's already popular, rather than something that's evidence-based.
No.
And earlier you said you went, you go to a club and you can't really get women because there's a lot more men. So this is maybe perhaps one way of getting more women by talking about issues that they all agree on.
I got to say, when I saw you, I had a
Survival
sneaking suspicion. No offense.
Yeah.
Maybe you're trying to ingratiate yourself. A lot of women will find that you're a good-looking guy. You've got a thing going. You've got an angle going. How much of this is,
Yeah,
that?
come on.
This is actually coming from a study of nature. If
No,
you study
everything
nature,
you say seems to be in denial of the rules of nature. It's terrifying.
you guys ain't trying to see it the way it's supposed to be seen. If you look at it properly,
We're seeing it the way it is.
you'll
I
realize
see a little
that
smile. I see a
the
little smile.
more.
He knows. We're seeing it the way it
It's
is.
great speaking to you. Great speaking.
Likewise, guys.
What's your
Likewise.
name?
I'm feeling cold,
Okay.
Hamza.
Okay,
need to
I'm
go
sure
home.
you'll have a
Yeah.
better time down the club now. Seriously, you'll be good. Cheers.
These guys, man.
Whose is this?
That's mine.
Can someone take off my mics?
There you go. Thank you.
Your comment was
great.
Yeah.
I was paying attention.
Whose mics are these?
You want more mics?